A massive welcome to the GRM podcast to Leon Taylor. Leon, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure to be with you.
Just in case anybody doesn't know you, I'm going to describe you as apart from being a silver medal winning Olympic diver, you're also a broadcaster, a speaker, a mentor, and author. Have I missed anything? Coach and a coach.
Yeah, also hiding from a real job, I think is fair to say. So yeah, a man of many hats, but less so the budgie smugglers these days. As you mentioned, my diving career is safely behind me, but I'm very lucky to play a part now as commentator for the BBC. It's much safer talking about it than it is actually throwing yourself off a very high diving board. And one of the joys I get to do is mentor the next generation of athletes, not just divers, but across both able-bodied and disabled sports. So I'm very much still part of the sport family, which is, of course, where I was, where I've been part of for as far as I can remember.
And you are known as the voice of diving, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly because of my shouting and screaming into the microphone. I tend to, some people have described me and my broadcasting style as a fan with a microphone, which is pretty accurate. I do actually have to prove my worth by giving you an insight into what the scores are going to be, and then of course when the scores come up, you see if I'm correct. But also I don't get to see the replay, and neither do the judges.
Oh.
So I watch the dive in real time, which takes 1.5 seconds. I then tell you what went well, what went awry, and then we see whether I'm correct or not when the replays go again in slow motion. So yeah, it's a high performance setting, one that I'm not unused to, of course, but it's it's a fun thing that I get to do now as part of my life after elite sport.
Love it, love it. Well, I was thinking Murray Walker, the voice of motor racing, Peter Alice, the voice of golf, Leon Taylor, the voice of diving. It's good company in there.
It's great company, thank you.
Well, listen, we'll really want to get into some of the work you do around mindset coaching. I want to talk about movement. I want to talk about sort of stress management. But just for anybody who doesn't know your story, are you happy just to tell us what happened to that 6-year-old rather active boy, and where you ended up in the elite sports?
Yeah, certainly. So I've got a backstory that I'm very proud of. I was a pain in the backside, according to my mum and dad, and they'd probably, if you speak to them now, would still refer to me in such a way. And the reason why I was a pain is because I wouldn't sleep. I had so much energy, I needed constant attention, and my poor mum and dad didn't know what to do with me. But they found that the more I moved, the more likely I was to fall asleep for more than half an hour. So my life of activity started way before I can remember. I was taken swimming, well, still in nappies, as many children are. I went to mother and baby gymnastics. And so my life of, these endeavors, sport, started, by way of just trying to tire me out. But my parents found that, movement was my medicine, if you will. And the more active I was, the easier I was to calm down and get to sleep and fit into the school routine, which of course I wasn't really designed for, because as we all know, school is often about sitting still and concentrating, and I couldn't do either of those. I'd have been better off at the back of the classroom doing star jumps when we were being taught mathematics. Anyway, my life of sport started. I did every single sport that was available near where I was born, in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, and I fell into diving, pun intended, because it was just one of the many sports that I got given the opportunity to try. And because I'd been in gymnastics since I was very, very young, the transferable skills lent themselves to a very quick acceleration in the sport of diving. And by the time I was 11, and this is before I was at senior school, I was competing at a national age group level in 3 sports, so swimming, gymnastics and diving. So Gordon, had to make my first career decision at the age of 11. That's pretty tough. I know we're talking to leaders and tough decisions. And, this was one that I needed to make back then, mainly because I had goals and aspirations and dreams of going to the Olympic Games. And of course, you can't do that by just doing things in your leisure time. There's an element of commitment, committed decisions. And so diving was the sport that I focused on, and that led me through the ranks. all the way juniors, first senior international at 16, first Olympic Games at 18. And then at the grand old age of 26, at my third Olympic Games, I stood on the podium and next to my teammate and great friend, Peter Waterfield, where we won British diving's first Olympic medal in 44 years. And that was in Athens, 2004. So that's a very brief summary of my adventure in elite sport. I continued on for a few years afterwards, aiming for my fourth Olympic Games, but my body couldn't handle what I was asking it to do. I used to train for 6 or 7 hours a day, 6 days a week, hit the water at over 35 miles an hour. And after 4 reconstructive shoulder surgeries, hernia surgery and chronic pain for the last 5 years of my career in my lower back, the medical team told me that if I was a horse, they'd probably have to shoot me. So it was time. It was time to get behind the microphone and leave it to the younger bucks, which of course has been a massive success, led by the likes of Tom Daley. From that point onwards, I'm very proud to be playing a part in that still.
You mentored Tom, didn't you? Your success in Athens, that unlocked a lot of the funding, didn't it?
Yeah, so what happened, Gordon, that time, the funding had been in place, and that's what I feel very thankful for, is that luck and randomness played a part in my success, as it does for all of us in what we do. The funding came into the sport after my first Olympic Games. So 1996, Team GB with 36 on the medal table. The press, as they love to, tore apart, the performances. We had one lonely gold medal, etc. But the reason being is because we were unfunded. At the time I was based up in Sheffield, lots of the elite athletes up there, they were all signing on, job seekers allowance, training full time. It was a very challenging time for sports people in the UK. The government funding through UK Sport, the government Quango, through the National Lottery came in 1998. And then because of that funding, and this wasn't just money in my pocket that I could pay my rent and afford to put food on the table, this was the opportunity to access psychologists, sports psychologists, nutritionists, physiotherapists, and to level the playing field to a certain degree with the likes of USA, China, Russia, France, Germany, Australia, all of these countries that had funding in place. And then, of course, it takes time, doesn't it, Gordon? You make an investment and then over time it comes to fruition. So the Athens Olympic Games was the chance for us to step into that space upon the podium. And it was, if you want to talk about stress and pressure, which I know we're going to get onto, if British diving, i.e. Peter and I, because we were arguably the hottest medal hope, if we didn't win an Olympic medal, the funding would have been cut for the entire sport. So we were surrounded by other athletes who were looking to us going, hey, you better nail this, otherwise we lose our funding. And then all of the coaches, the national performance director, no one explicitly said to Peter and I, our jobs are on the line, you better win a medal, otherwise we're all screwed. But implicitly, that was the atmosphere. Everyone was there and they knew that was the fact. So when you are under pressure as we were, and you've got this moment in time, you've got 5 dives, each takes 1.5 seconds, every single one counts. And then you've got that external pressure layered upon you, it's very easy to falter. And I feel very proud that I'd worked so hard over the previous 6 years with the likes of the leading sports psychologists in the country in order to navigate that very intense, very uncertain and very challenging environment in the moment, but in the lead up too, because our mind can be our best ally, but it can also undo all of our hard work instantly.
Love it. I could spend a lot more time speaking about your diving and the world's most difficult dive I wanted to get into, but we'll maybe say that for next time. But
sure.
Just picking up that point then. So a lot of people listening are running businesses. I run a business myself. It is a continuous pressure because of the responsibilities you have towards other people, whether that's your customers, your employees, and then you get markets. It's been quite a tough market for a lot of people in the last this year. What are the kind of takeaways from dealing with pressure that can be generally carried across from the Olympics to high performance sport to running a business?
Yeah, so there's many things. Our ability to perform is directly linked to how we balance stress and recovery. right? And let me just unpack that slightly. So that I'm speaking from a very informed position. I work now as an executive coach, and I'm delighted to take my lessons from elite sport and apply those into all performance settings. And arguably, all of us are in a performance setting, and we're affected by external. We're also affected by internal, and we all know if we're not getting enough recovery, we can get more into recovery, what that actually is, then our performance is going to drop. And same in elite sport. So there's a huge amount of stress through training and practice on the body, diving, any sport. And if you don't recover from that, your body just gets more and more fatigued, more and more tired. Your cognitive ability to think correctly under pressure, your ability to control your emotions gets squashed, and your performance, falls in the wrong direction. So this ability to balance stress and recovery is hugely important. Sometimes it's easier to look at sport and think, well, of course, you're lifting those heavy weights. That's an acute stress on the body. You've got to stop doing that in order for the muscles to get stronger. But it's the same for any kind of performance. So if I'm working as an entrepreneur or business leader, if I'm pushing, meeting after meeting after meeting after pitch, after looking at this paperwork, after doing this, after doing that, that's all stress. So my body, my physiological response is stress, sympathetic nervous system. I'm in fight mode. I'm not fighting anything, but I'm kind of, readiness. And that's really important that we're able to access that, because that gives us increased focus and our ability. It's a readying. But if we keep that turned on, then we don't get any recovery. There's no parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, rejuvenate, which is me putting the weights down or stopping the diving and having a lie down for 20 minutes in order for the body to settle down and the mind to come back on, and those fine motor controls. So we find in a business setting, and many of the leaders and entrepreneurs and high performers that I work with don't focus enough on recovery, because we fall into this habit of go, do, because there's always something to do. And I honor that and I accept that. And I could have applied that to my sporting career. Well, there's always more dives to practice, but you can imagine what happens to my level of resources. So what we're looking at here, this stress and recovery balance, is we are trying to create the opportunity for us to sustain performance. Because it's all well and good being able to game it for a day or for a week, or in some case for a few months. But we all know, Gordon, that you have to pay the piper at some point. And that can be worn out, leading to burnout, leading to illness, leading to all of these other physical, mental, emotional impacts, which it's too late when we get there. It's noticing what is happening at the time. And sometimes we are oblivious to it. And I think that's one of the advantages in elite sport, is that there's many other stakeholders keeping an eye on you. So there's the people who I've mentioned, but also there's the ability to get your own personalized data. And that's one thing that I'm really passionate about, is that when I'm working with someone, whether it's a mentee in the world of sport, or whether it's someone in the world of business, I work across industries, the stories we tell ourselves, which is, I'm fine, this is okay, we almost have to tell ourselves a story to get through, the uncertainty and the stress and all of those things. But the real story is, what is our physiology saying? So the use of data, personalized data, to measure the stress response 24 hours a day, which comes from my background in sport, gives you a very different insight. It gives you a look under the hood. How am I really doing? Oh, shoot, that isn't so good. And then you can have more informed conversations about what one can do. Not one size fits all. Gordon, get more sleep. Yeah, I know, Leon. Were you going to do it? Of course you're not. But if I show you some physiological data of the behaviors you're doing, managing stress or not in the day, effect of exercise or not, the quality of sleep that you're gaining in recovery within the sleep, if I show you physiological data that pertains to you, and then we have a conversation around sleep strategies and such, you're more likely, I would say massively more likely, to make a change. And if you were to work with me as a coach, because of my high levels of accountability and that retainer that I put in place, I'm there just to tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, you said you were going to do this. It's Tuesday. Have you done it yet? And that, for me, is the way that habit and behavior change comes in. And to be honest, there's no way I would have wanted to train 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. But because of the setup because of the coaching that was there all the time, that high level of accountability, it just enabled those habits to be embedded. And people said, how did you do that? I said, well, I just did. And I'm not being flippant when I say I just trained for 7 hours. I'm saying it's the habits that got formed. Motivation gets you going, but it's habit that keeps you going.
So let's take a business leader. Let's take me. So
Okay.
I run a business. I'm reasonably active. Do some running, play some tennis, etc., etc. So I keep out there, walk my dog 3 times a day somehow. Occasionally I'm guilty of working too hard, unhealthily hard, and I know that. I threw away my Apple Watch because I was bored of things pinging and bored of screens. Are you saying I should be looking at the data and educating myself a little bit more than I do, because I don't look at data around my personal health. I do what I think makes sense.
Yeah,
I should really be looking at data, because otherwise, how do I know that I've actually peaked?
Certainly, yeah. So, you know, in order to, you know, the starting point is what's working for you, what isn't working for you. So there's the objective and a subjective. Well, okay, so I'm doing this and I feel this, and that's really important. So how are you feeling in the moment? Like, where are other people noticing, like, you know, Gordon, you're doing well, your friends, your family, other people getting that feedback. But the personalized data is really important, but it's knowing how to interpret it and what to do with it, because we are overwhelmed by data if we want to be. And they go, well, what do I do with that? So I specifically focus on heart rate variability, which, long story short, is the space in between your heartbeats. And what that shows, and has done for, you know, there's many, many white papers out there showing that this is probably the most accurate way of monitoring your sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Are you in stress or are you in recovery? Now, there are many devices out there that do it, but the one that I use is a technology partner, Firstbeat, who've been around and working in sport for decades. And now it's I'm wearing one now, actually. It's just on here. It's really, you know, non-invasive. I often, you know, it sticks here with the sticky pads. And what that does, it just gives you that really accurate data. And you only wear it for a number of days. I normally invite clients to wear it for a week. And what we would do then, Gordon, we would just have a look at a typical week. And it maps out alongside a journal of your, like, meeting, taking the kids here, going out for dinner there, meals, any alcohol consumption, any exercise, what it was. And it shows you this beautifully. There's obviously algorithms that have been built over time in order to show this. And it gives you your physiological data. And then we can look at how you're going on in your week anyway, and then just think, okay, so what is going on here for you personalized? And then start to have conversations around that. It's a really lovely beginning to a conversation of what's working, what isn't working, where do we go from here? Because it's not one size fits all. In fact, that's rubbish. All this data is good, but compared to what, you know, what do I do with it? And so you don't do anything, because it's the paradox of choice. Whereas if you're working very specifically to look at stress recovery balance, the effect of any exercise and quality of sleep, I guarantee if you're able to increase bandwidth through increasing your resources, then your performance in all of your roles, personally, professionally, will increase on its own. So you don't need to know what you need to do there, because that capacity just invites high performance and your ability to sustain it as well, which is what we're after as business leaders. We want to be able to sustain our high performance. We want to be able to coach, inspire, lead others. And if we're not looking after ourselves specifically to what we need in our life set of circumstances, whether you've got children, whether you haven't, whether you know, there's all these different things that play into our ability to navigate stress and recover quickly. There's genetics as well. And it's really interesting to see what strategies would work for you and what need refining. Because often we're just, especially as leaders, it can be very lonely. I was lonely as a sports person because, you know, no one really understands. You can't really ask other people, how am I doing? Because they're often reporting into you. So to have someone next to you, as I did for a coach, to give me that, you know, insight into things that are working, things that I need to maybe try differently, was so valuable. And I think your business leaders are really missing that, because they're just doing their very best with the resources they've got, and there's no one there to guide them, to call them out, to challenge them or support them. And I think that's a real shame.
I mean, it's, when you describe that, I'm just thinking that makes so much sense. And actually, if I want to be the best version of myself, I need a little bit of data behind it. Who do you find is really embracing this? So the work that you're doing as an executive coach, where you're helping them understand this? Is it generational, or is it entrepreneurs, or is it the corporate world embracing it?
Yeah, it's not really following a specific pattern, but what happens when people are given the opportunity to have a look, it's fascinating. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that data was available, because of course, a few decades ago, you had to go into hospital and be plugged into a machine that I'm wearing now talking to you. This is completely wearable. The only thing it isn't is waterproof. So there's obviously still things to develop. So what happens in my experience is that people don't know that it's available, that it's non-invasive, that it's really good quality, accurate data, that you can make really informed decisions on your wellness, your health, your vitality, and your performance. And once you realize that, it's like, oh, wow. Because of course, I would say that anyone listening to your podcast uses data in their business, right?
Absolutely.
And so why wouldn't we use data in our personal world? Well, because we don't really know what we're doing with it. There's too much of it and we don't know what to trust, potentially. So again, those decision-making processes that we use in business like that all the time, we can apply those to ourselves. Go, okay, so who does know how to interpret this data and what I should be paying attention to? And that's the first step, isn't it? Getting, you know, I've been advised by experts my entire life. There's no way that I could have stood on that Olympic podium if I wasn't guided by experts in their fields, all these specialisms just guiding me, because otherwise I would have just been overwhelmed by, where do I look? What do I do? How do I improve? So it's that guidance which is so important. And of course, we've got to concentrate on the quote unquote day job. You know, what we're doing as business leaders. So we can't then be spending an excessive amount of time reading up on the latest white papers about how to interpret heart rate variability. You just need someone who's already done that, who can guide you. But I think the key is having someone on your team, but not someone on your team that's just there to support you, someone who's there to call you out on the things that, you know, you can do better, that you're committing to and not delivering on. Because if you commit to something in business and don't deliver on it, you're called out. But if you do it personally, go, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you haven't got anyone to knock on your door at 6 in the morning, if that's when you were going, you could potentially go, well, I'm not doing that because I'm whatever. You know, we make these excuses, don't we?
Yeah. Really interesting, really interesting. You're and just on in movement, which I watched your TED talk, which I absolutely loved, really thought provoking. And again, occasionally you hear these things that slightly frustrate you, because it makes such sense, and you think, yeah, more movement, should be doing that. But just talk to me about that movement thing, because again, I just came off a call with one of the team who's just bought a stand-up desks because she wanted to do a little bit more movement during the day. But you're really passionate about how much we're moving or not.
Yeah, completely. When it comes down to it, we are designed to move. If we look at the structure of the skeleton, we're not designed to sit excessively. But of course, all of the many of us find ourselves, you know, sitting for long periods of time. So there's lots of things that happen. You know, moving our body, even just a little bit, changes our experience of the world. So, for example, if we are sitting and something happens and I'm in this position, which causes me to respond, you know, say a message comes in from my boss or something lands where I say, oh, I'm not expecting. And the tension immediately appears in my body. My body then, the brain thinks, okay, you're in danger. And so you move into that stress response, which is useful for me to respond. Okay, but when something else happens immediately, something else pings, my phone goes, and they've got all these things coming in, that layers upon, and then my body is not resourceful because it's in sympathetic, it needs to fight or flight, so it's readying itself. Thinking isn't necessarily the solution to that, because then we start thinking, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, and we potentially move into overthinking, which of course adds to the stress response. So the easiest way to disrupt that is to move the body. Now, there's loads of data, loads of evidence out there to show that physical movement is, you know, one of the fastest ways, or the fastest way to transport your emotional state. So power posing, there's fantastic research. Amy Cuddy's TED talk out there is one worth watching. If you and Wendy Suzuki, another researcher, showing how physical movement changes, you know, everything in your body. But it's the short-term and long-term effects. So short-term, if I feel stress in my body, let's say I get tense in my shoulders, my breathing starts to shallow because of the emails that have come in, Okay, if I just stand up, maybe move my shoulders back, or even deepen my breath, I completely change what's happening hormonally in my nervous system. So I can move from that fight flight more towards rest, digest, rejuvenate, which of course changes the way the brain is functioning. There's more more activity in the prefrontal cortex, so I make better decisions. I come back to bandwidth and I can navigate that. That's very hard to do when my shoulders are hunched and I'm not breathing. So one of the cues for me is to constantly move. If you can spend time moving while you're seated, so your colleague who's built the standing desk is perfect, because that invites a little bit of proprioception, which is balance. If I'm there, not swaying, because that will make people feel a bit dizzy, but there is that element of steadying yourself, that's firing different parts of the brain. It allows us not to become, that sedentary, and the tension comes into the body, and then we start to slow down and our performance starts to drop, but we don't know that it's dropping. So those constant breaks are really important to disrupt any buildup of stress. But the long-term benefits of exercise are huge. It changes the shape of your brain, increases you physically, but also the mental health effects of consistent exercise. Tons of papers to show that cardio is really important, resistance training, and the effects it has on the physical and the mental and emotional are so profound. It is the wonder drug that isn't a drug. It's available to all of us. There will be limitations for people physically, what they can and can't do, but there's always a way to change and to move a little bit more. So it becomes, where can I fit that in? What am I doing? What could I do more of? Can I space 5 minutes in between my meetings? Ideally, if you're in office, you walk down the corridor. That's a great way to shake it off. And there's all these quick wins, low-hanging fruit. There's also the long-term benefits, of the stress recovery balance I've talked about, the effect of physical movement on our emotional, mental health, all the way through this notion of health span. How long can I be healthy for while I'm still alive?
And it really, the way you plan your diary, the gaps you give yourself, all that can enable that movement, can't it? No, really interesting. Anyone listening, I really urge you to listen to that TED talk, because it's absolutely fantastic. Now, you're a double author, am I right? You've written. I haven't read Leon's Magic Mantra. I think it was aimed at younger generation.
It was, yeah.
but your other book you wrote, Mentor, wasn't it? I was quite interested in that, because there's so many books on coaching. But why did you choose to write a book on mentoring?
Yeah, so that's back I published that in 2010, 2011. And I'm not one for sitting down typing into a computer, so it was a huge challenge. And the most wonderful thing about that book is that I was mentored by a mentor in writing it. So my dear friend and someone like Darryl Scott, who was an author himself, was like, "Oh, Leon, you should write a book." And I immediately went, "Oh no, I can't write a book." And I had all these BS excuses as to why I couldn't. And then realized when I was met with that resistance, oh, okay, so I need to call myself out on this. What is it that's stopping me? Limited beliefs, etc. So it was a wonderful exercise in standing in that uncomfortableness of doing something that you don't believe in yourself or whatever. So it was really wonderful for me. But also writing about mentoring whilst being mentored was just a great thing. And there's for me, it was mentoring was something that happened accidentally. So in elite sport, it's all about the athlete. So I'm in a world where everything is filtered through, is this going to affect my performance positively? And self-centered. So can you come to my wedding, Leon? No, I'm competing, training. There's all of these things. And giving back wasn't really on my radar until I had the opportunity to. And then it dawned on me, I saw Tom Daley dive for the first time. At the time, we've talked about this, when we've done bits and pieces together. I was 26, I was his hero, he was 10. We had this wonderful meeting, and, he was the guy. I said, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could, get everything that's in my head and just put it in his?" And I'm sure he would be, brilliant, even more brilliant than he is at this 10-year-old. And that's when I became his mentor, when I offered and he said yes. And I didn't really know what to do, Gordon. And of course, I made the classic errors of, trying to tell people what to do, which I don't think works for anyone. I gave too much information. And over this time, I kind of figured out, what was effective by way of how you behave when you're a mentor. And that for me was wonderful to then to try and share that in a book. I didn't want it to be too big because I didn't like reading, you know, big books, because I get halfway through and then lose interest. So I was like, can I make it short, sharp, concise? Can I make these techniques that I'm exploring through mentoring, which of course are applicable to teachers and coaches as well, but this notion of mentoring, how do you share your experience by not telling someone what to do? Because they know that you know the answer, but how do you give them an answer that isn't answering their question so they get to learn themselves? And for me, it was a wonderful adventure and exercise to kind of pull together the techniques that I was, you know, fine tuning, but also the ones that I was noticing in those who were mentoring me in all these different areas, through sport, through as a speaker, as a coach and a facilitator, and all these other areas where I was seeking the experience of those who had been there and got the t-shirt, and finding out what landed for me on the receiving end as a mentee, but also what I was noticing as a mentor, what was creating that independence. Which is what you want to create when you're in that relationship. So you don't want to be doing someone's homework for them. Here you go. And they just come back and go, oh, I can't do this. Can you do it for me? You know, that's exactly what you don't want to create.
It does. I've launched a few mentoring programs over the years in various capacities, but it does. I do have a little obsession about everybody having 2 or 3 mentors that can share their experiences, and you know, regularly encouraging people, you know, who is your mentor? Where are you getting insights from?
And multiple mentors. And mentor relationships can last a short time, like the length of a project, or they can last a long time and they evolve. So Tom and I were, you know, back in the day, it was definitely mentor mentee, and now we're great friends. And of course, he's announced his comeback for Paris, and I've been chatting to him about that, and still able to support. But that it doesn't need to, it's just this relationships that develop, the connection, the sense of belonging, the relationships. It's amazing where they lead. And short, sharp mentoring relationships are perfectly good, perfectly valid. It isn't a commitment of like, oh, Gordon, you know, I asked Gordon, will you mentor me? And you say yes, and that's it. You're my mentor for life. Hopefully there'll be a connection there, and it's fine. And I'm a big, you know, like you, encouraging people to seek multiple mentors. There's so much to learn, and people like to share. We like to help. We like to support.
I love it. So how can people work with you, Leon?
Yeah, so if you're interested in working, just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. AdekiPerformance.com is the little bit more of an insight into the performance management that I do, and shows a little bit of the insights and the technology and how all of that works. But, you know, the best and most exciting thing is to have a conversation. If you're interested in finding out more about what it is that I do, either as a speaker or a coach, then I'd be delighted to have a conversation, because, you know, it's a tough world out there. You know, there's so many things that are changing. Our uncertainty tolerance is being tested. You know, we're being hit left, right, and center, and you know, we often fall into a pattern of trying to be prepared for everything, right? And I would argue that that's impossible. So what's the alternative? Well, if you can be ready for anything, then you're always going to be responsive. And how do you do that? Well, this is knowing what's going on for you, improving your ability to maintain the balance between stress and recovery, so that when things come out of, you know, left and right all at the same time, you've got the capacity to respond, and respond resourcefully.
Love it. Love it. Final 2 quick questions. Who is the next Tom Daly? What's the name we should watch out for?
Well, listen, what's interesting for me now is that there are many names bubbling through. So Tom was a superstar. You don't need a next Tom Daly, because we've still got one, it seems, who's going into Paris.
Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. But what's wonderful, so Andrea Spendolini Syriacs is our platform diver. She is, you know, shot into the spotlight, BBC Young Sports Personality of the Year, medals all the way through, and it's so wonderful to see women's diving in Great Britain coming through to the forefront as well. So probably giving her a shout out as we go into the final year before the Paris Olympic Games.
Love it. Straight from the boys of diving. And what else is inspiring you at the moment?
Well, my biggest challenge at the moment, Gordon, is my 3-year-old. who, you know, if you want, for those of you that are parents out there, know, for those of you that aren't, it is the biggest challenge I've ever faced. And all of my mentoring coaching techniques are being tested to the limits to see if I can communicate effectively and negotiate most of the time with a three-nager, as I was told the other day. So that's my main focus at the moment, and I'm enjoying every second of it.
So you're even more empathetic to your parents.
Indeed.
Those years ago. Leon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really, really appreciate you coming on. And I just think there's so much in there. I do find that too many business leaders are good at looking after their people, and maybe not quite as good as looking after themselves. So I just think that's some really interesting insights, how we can maybe work on that to get sustainable high performance. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute treat.
Thank you again. Cheers, Gordon.
Don't forget to follow the TRM podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for a new exciting episode every week.